Hi there. Today I'm going to do a lesson for you that I just love. I love to do factoring. I think it's kind of fun to figure out the ways that this can work, but it's fun because I understand it. And if factoring is something you don't understand, it kind of loses its entertainment. So I'm going to take a little bit of time at the beginning here and make sure you understand what's going on so that factoring can be fun for you too. All right, so here we go. Really, when we say factor, what we're factoring really means division. You're finding the factors that would have multiplied together. So you're undoing multiplication. Well, this goes back to when you learned how to multiply binomials together. So if I've got several here binomials, and we're going to go back and look at what you were doing. If you'll remember, we did FOIL on this. And so FOIL means you multiply the first, then you multiply the outer, then you multiply the inner, and then you multiply the last. And you actually end up with 4 terms when you multiply these binomials together. So let's just practice on this one. So the first times the first would get you x squared. And then when you do the outer, you have x times 2, which would get you a positive 2x. Then you do the inner, that's going to get you a positive 6x. And then you multiply the last, and you get 12. And then the middle 2 terms typically were like terms that could combine together, and so you have x squared plus 8x plus 12. Okay, now that's what we've already done. What we're trying to do is factor these. Now notice, real quick, notice the form of this trinomial that I have. This is if you look at the title of this, it's in x squared plus bx plus c form. So basically they're just telling you it's a trinomial, that this is always going to be like an x squared or any letter, but it's just a variable squared. Now, our goal today is to factor that, which means to actually what we're going to be given is this trinomial, and we're going to try to come back and turn it into these 2 binomials here. So now how could we do that? So let's look at our work to help us figure that out. First of all, you got to look at where does your x squared come from? Well, that x squared is right here, which was multiplying first together. So we know that if this is going to be an x squared, the only way to get that is to have your first be x and x. Okay, so then if I were doing this, I'd set this up, I'd immediately just jump in and I'd put these parentheses here, and I'd put x and I'd put x. And then I'm going to go look at my last one here, because remember it came from this 12, which was the last. So I know that the last 2 numbers are going to have to multiply to get me a 12. Now here's what gets tricky, is there's a lot of things that could multiply to get me a 12. It could be a 1 and a 12. It could be a 3 and a 4. It could be a 2 and a 6. I don't know any of those would multiply to 12, so how do I know which one to use? And in fact, here's the other thing, is not only could it be those, but it could be a negative 1 times a negative 12. Those 2 could be factors that would multiply together. Or a negative 3 and a negative 4. Or a negative 2 and a negative 6. So I have 6 different choices here of what could multiply together to get me this positive 12 that I want. All right, so of these 6 options though, I have to pick the one that's also going to get me this middle term. So if we look at this middle term here comes from joining the outer and the inner, because those were the outer and the inner, they were like terms. So somehow or the other I have to have the outer and the inner get me this 8x. And so you can see that this 2 and the 6 were how I came up with it. So I needed to pick the numbers over here that would multiply to get me this last number, but I need them to add up to get me 8. So as I go through here, I know these all multiply, but which ones also happen to add up to 8? Oh, it's 2 and 6. These add up to 8. So it multiplies to this last number, adds up to your middle number. Okay, notice that the 2 and the 6 are both positive, so when I would write this, I'd write plus 2 and plus 6. Okay, now notice that there it would be factored right there. I just threw that in there, but now I look at it and I say, oh, whoops, see how they're switched? This was a 6, but my x plus 6 is here. Here's my x plus 2, here's my x plus 2. That doesn't really matter. The order that you put those two binomials, it could go either way. It doesn't matter. Okay, so I've got it factored. All right, so now what I've done is I've got 3 more of these, and notice I keep using that 6 and 2. The only thing that's changing is that sign. So let's try this again. We're going to do FOIL. Let's look at what happens on this one. My first gets me x squared. I'm going to kind of fly through the FOIL part of this so that we don't spend forever here. Outer would get me a negative 2x. Inner would get me a negative 6x. Last is a negative 6 times a negative 2 that gets me a positive 12. So then I have x squared minus 8x plus 12. So if I look at this, now again, this is going to be the thing that they actually give me. They're going to give me this and want me to come up with those binomials. So we're kind of working backwards. Look at what you want. You want things to multiply to get you a positive 12. Oh, well, that's this list right here still, right? But this time I want them to add up to a negative 8, because see how these added up to a negative 8? Okay, so as I go through my list, I have to find, oh, here it is, this one. These multiply to that 12, but these are going to add up to a negative 8. So then my answer, when I set this up, would be x times x, there's my x squared, and then I want a negative 2 and a negative 6. That'll get me the positive 12 that I want, but when they add up, they get me a negative 8. Okay, so now let's look at what's different. If you'll come down here on these last 2 examples, you'll notice that my signs are different on these 2. So let's see how that changes what we do. So again, starting off, let's just do the FOIL. The first gets me x squared. Outer is going to get me a negative 2x. Inner is a plus 6x. And last would get me minus 12. So now when I combine these, when I combine my middle terms, notice that the signs are different here. It's a negative 2 and a positive 6. Okay, so that'll get me a positive 4x. The other thing that's different is now my 12 is negative, because remember I did last, and that'd be a positive times a negative, so now that's a negative 12. All right, if I was working backwards and trying to come up with that, I'd still have x and x to get my x squared, but this time I'm going to have to pick factors of 12 that multiply, or factors of, really it's a negative 12. They have to multiply to be a negative. So when I'm going down my list, it's not 1 and 12, it's 1 and negative 12. Or possibly, well, and let's just kind of go through the list like we'd have up there. 3 and 4, but maybe 3 and negative 4. That would make it negative 12. 2 and negative 6. But there's nothing magic about making that second number negative. What if instead it was the first number that was negative? How about negative 1 times a positive 12? Or negative 3 times a positive 4? Or a negative 2 times a positive 6? All right, so those are all the factors of negative 12. Which ones also happen to add up to positive 4? So as I go through my list, oh look, these would add, oh, but that would be a negative 4 when I combine those. So I bet it's this one down here. A positive 6 and a negative 2 would get me that positive 4. So I've got it. I want it to be a negative 2 and a positive 6. Okay, last one. Let's see what happens here. Doing FOIL on it. X times x is x squared. Outer is a positive 2x. Inner is a negative 6x, and last would get me a negative 12. Combine those 2 middle terms. Okay, now let's look at how similar this is to the one we have here. Very similar, still looking for factors of negative 12, so that's this list, but this time I want my middle term to be a negative 4 instead of a positive 4. How do you think I can make that happen? Still going to be x and x, but instead of having the -2 and +6, I'm going to want the +2 and the -6 because those will combine to get me a -4. Okay, so then that'll be a +2 and a -6. Now, there we go. Now you'll notice in all of these, hey, this was the answer that was right here. I already knew what my answer was, but I tried to approach it like I didn't already know that. All right, so we took quite a while there, but if this makes sense in your head, factoring should be easy and fun. So let's move on. So let's start factoring some of these without having to take quite that much time. So on this one, I'm going to start out. I don't know the answer this time, but I know that my firsts are going to multiply to x squared. So that's going to be x and x. And then I have to come up with numbers that are going to multiply to a +48. Well, there's a lot of them, but remember, I want them to multiply to 48, but they have to also add up to 14. Well, actually, that's probably the first one that would have come to mind for me. I think that's 6 and 8. 6 and 8 could multiply. Now, do you think that I'm going to want it to be a 6 times an 8? Or do I want it to be a -6 times a -8? Because both of these scenarios would get me this +48 that I want. Which one of those do you think we want? Well, hopefully you're saying, oh, I want them to be positive because when they add up, I want it to be a +14x. So I'm going to have a +6 + 8. Okay, let's try again. Next one. First are going to be x and x. This time we're looking for numbers that multiply to a +24. There's a lot of them again. But not only do they have to multiply to that +24, when I add them up, they have to be a -10. So the first one that comes to mind for me is 6 and 4. But 6 times 4 will get the 24, but it's a +10, and I want it to be a -10 in the middle. So wouldn't it make sense to make them both be negative? That would still multiply to get a positive, but when I add it, it gets me negative. So then we'd have -6 -4. Okay, notice on these two examples that these were both positive signs. When these are positive signs, the only way that can happen is if these two numbers being multiplied have the same sign. They're either both positives or they're both negatives. So what that tells me is if this is a positive right here, that these two signs are going to have to be the same, either both pluses or both minuses. All right, what if this number here is negative? Well, to get a negative number, that means I'm going to have to multiply a positive times a negative. So in my mind, I'm thinking, well, I know it's x and x, and what multiplies to 28? Well, it's 7 and 4 are my first guess, but think about your signs as you do this. It's a -28. So I can either go with a -4 and a +7, or a +4 and a -7. That will make it be -28. Now, which one of those also will add up to -3? Well, hopefully you picked this one. Your bigger number needs to be negative if I'm going to want that to be negative. All right, so then I'm going to write +4 -7. Now remember what I said, just as a quick reminder, that the order that you write these binomials does not matter, because you might also have written x -7 and x +4, and that is absolutely okay. Exact same answer. All right, so let's throw some other weird ones in here. Not really weird, but just the software asks you kind of in a different way. On this example, they actually gave you one of the answers. So I'm going to right now pretend I don't even see this right here. I'm just going to set this up like I always would. I would just say, all right. Now notice it's not x's. It will be picky about that. If you type in an x and it wants an a, it's going to count it wrong. So a and a. Things that multiply to 14, I'm guessing probably 7 and 2, but notice that it's a negative, so that'll have to be a -7 and a +2, or a +7 and a -2. Well, since I want my middle term to be a +5, I better have my 7 be positive, which makes sense because look, they already did that. Okay, so then I'm going to put a plus 7 and a minus 2. Now when you enter this in the software, they've already given you the a plus 7, so you're really only typing in the second part of that as you type it in. Now that actually reminded me of one other thing on those types of problems. They always give you the option to say that it's non-factorable. In other words, you can't come up with numbers that will ever work out right to multiply to this last number and still add up to this middle number. So sometimes non-factorable is an option, though I would not recommend you put that a lot because most of the time they're giving you stuff that will factor. So that's really only if you've tried and tried and tried and you just can't get it to come out. Okay, so now that we've done the basics, let's throw a few in here of the harder ones that they incorporate in this lesson. In this first example here, you'll notice that not only is there an x, but there's also a y. Okay, don't overthink this. This is really pretty easy. It's just that when you're going to have an x and an x for the first multiplied, and then your last, it's not just a 28, it's a 28y squared. So my numbers that multiply to 28, but will add up to a negative 70 or a negative 11, well, a positive 28 means my signs have to be the same. Since I want to end up with a negative over here, I think they're both going to have to be negatives. So I think it's a negative 7 and a negative 4. That would multiply to a positive 28 and get me my negative 11. But it's not just 28 that I want it to be 28y squared. So it'll be negative 7y and negative 4y. And that'll turn into a y squared when I multiply. So I put it in here, negative 7y and negative 4y. And you've got it. That's your answer. Now as far as that middle term working out, just real quick, you can see that if you were to multiply your outer, that'd be a negative 4xy. And your inner would be a negative 7. I'd always put my x first on that. And that's where that xy comes in. It just takes care of itself. So if you see an extra variable on the end, you attach the variable with your numbers on the end numbers as well. Okay, let's look at this next one. They do a lot of this one where notice all of a sudden that this is no longer a 1 or like there's nothing there. Now they have a 2 sitting here. Well, what they're really wanting you to do is practice what you'd learned previously about pulling out a GCF. And you really want to look for that every time, that if this is, not only if this is some other number other than 1, but really in general, looking forward onto the next lessons you're going to be doing, always look to pull a GCF out. Not only is it not completely factored unless you do, it makes all your numbers way smaller, so it's easier to pick out the right numbers to set up in your parentheses. So in this one, my GCF looks like it's a 2. So I'm going to pull a 2 out. And then I have x squared plus 3x minus 18. Now what I do is I put that 2 there and I kind of ignore it, but don't forget to put it there because it'll get counted wrong if you just forget about it. It stays there, and now you factor this trinomial that's left. So it's x and x, factors that multiply to a negative 18, but are going to add up to a 3. Well, I think it's probably going to be a 6 and a 3, but since it's a negative 18, it's going to have to be this, or it's going to have to be this. Which one of those will get you your positive 3? Well, it would be this one right here. So then I know it's a plus 6 minus 3. And that's my final answer with the 2 written out in front. Okay, so if you're really wanting to kind of learn this well, let's pause the video for a minute here and you try this next one on your own. Pause it, and then when you think you have your correct answer, go ahead and restart the video and I'll have the answer there for you. Okay, here's the answer I have. Not only could I pull a number out, this one I could pull a v out as well. And what that does is that gets that back down to a v squared for my first term. This should have been how that factored for you. All right, let's look at one of these that is not just straight up factoring, but they're making you kind of understand what's going on. In this problem, it says consider the following integers. All right, got it. I got a -6 and I got a 5. For the two numbers listed, find two factors of the first number, so things that multiply to -6, okay, such that their product is the first number. Yeah, that's what I said. They multiply to -6. And their sum is going to add up to the second number. So let's look. What are the numbers that multiply to -6? Well, that could be 1 and -6. Or it could be a -1 and a +6. It could be a 2 and a -3. Or a -2 and a +3. Okay, I think that's all of them. That's what will multiply to -6. Now you have to pick out the one that adds up to 5. And so if you look through your options there, it should be this one. And so that's just what you type in. You'd put in a -1 and you'd put in a 6, and the order that you write those wouldn't matter. All right, let's try one more. This one's kind of a word problem thing. It says the area in square inches of a rectangle is given by the polynomial function, and this is the messy function here. If the length of the rectangle is m plus 3, what is the width? All right, so just something to remember here, that when you're looking for, if this is your length and this is your width, when you find area, it's just length times width. You're just multiplying those together. Okay. So this is some kind of fancy function notation, but they're really just saying that the area is this polynomial right here. All right, so let's put that in for A. M squared plus 11m plus 24 is equal to the length. Well, we know the length is m plus 3. They want us to find the width. Well, really what you're doing is you're finding that other parenthesis that would have multiplied to that polynomial. So this is like that example we had earlier, that they're really trying to help you out on this factoring. If you were to factor this out, you'd have m and m, things that multiply to 24. Well, heck, we already know that one's a 3, so 3 times 8. And we already know that that's a plus. And since we want this to be a positive 24, the signs are going to have to be the same. So that's going to have to also be a plus. And as I was hoping, 3 and 8 does add up to 11, so that's going to work out. So the width is going to be m plus 8. And that's what you would type in as your final answer. The width would have to be m plus 8. All right. I hope this helps. I hope you can learn to love factoring as much as I do. Good luck. And actually, you have several more lessons after this one that incorporates this factoring. So the easier that this is here at this basic level, the easier it's going to be futuristically for you.